Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you some top podcasts that you should be listening to. Yes, I'm going to give you 4 podcasts plus 2 for my engineering people. The reason why I'm giving you just 4 is because I don't want to bombard you with a lot of recommendations, considering now there's a lot of information going around. Especially recently, there's this issue in the podcast world where an expert, maybe on the healthcare, medicine, or whatever, will come and say something, then another expert will come and say something different, and you see people like filming in the comment sections and stuff. Or you have this issue where there's this popular person, let's say Elon Musk, for example, he goes to this podcast and then he goes to another podcast and then goes to another podcast. So people are like, I've already watched him there. Why do I need to watch him? Like, there's this issues going around in the podcast world. I'm just going to give you 4 podcasts for intellectuals. You're an intellectual if you're like trying to be successful in your business, in your intellectual pursuit, and so on. Now let's get into it. The first one I'm going to recommend is Deep Dive with Ali Abdaal. Now this is my best podcast out there. This is what I listen to the most. And this is the podcast that really got me into listening to podcasts, considering that there was a time I was listening to it and I had this moment of like, why is this thing free? Because there was a lot of value packed in the discussions that he was having with his guests. Ali does a very good job of getting guests that are like well known in their field, and he asks them really thought-provoking questions. And he does this thing that I really like, where he questions his guests as if he's just starting out. He asks them questions like, what would you say to your 18-year-old self or 20-year-old self that is lost and he's trying to build his journey, he's trying to change his life? And you hear a lot of wisdom from the guest on how to go from this stage to this stage. Like, this is one of the things that I really like about podcasts. You get to hear the story of, a lot of guests and how they got from where they were to where they are now. And a lot of times when we are looking for guidance, we like, when we're giving practical steps. This is a podcast where a lot of the guests get pushed to that corner by Ali Abdaal. He makes them, share with us what we should do to get better. This is why I think you should watch this podcast. Whatever you are you a student? Are you a content creator? Do you have a business? Are you a freelancer? Do you want to build a business? Are you an entrepreneur? And so on. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, Ali Abdaal has guests across, all these fields. So that is why I really recommend that you should go listen to this podcast. My best episode from the podcast is called You're Not Lazy, How to Learn Anything Faster. And the guest for that one was Cliff Witzman. Oh my God. This is one of those podcasts where you're listening to and you're getting a lot of value, and you get to hear the story of someone that you've never known. That's one interesting thing about the podcast. It doesn't have to be popular people on the show. No, it's like these wonderful people out there that you have never known, you've never seen, but then sharing their story, telling you how they live their life, telling you how they got from where they were and how they got to the success they're in right now. So this is a very good podcast for you to listen to. Make sure you go listen to my own favorite podcast. I bet you're going to like it. Now, the next podcast I'm going to recommend, you can even guess it because this is one of the most recommended podcasts out there. It's The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Barlett. I mean, this is one of the most followed podcasts out there. As at the time of recording this video, the podcast has like 7.91 million subscribers. I mean, that says a lot about it. That shows that, the podcast must be that good for it to must have garnered a lot of people like this. In the podcast, Stephen Barlett does a very good job of inviting, highly qualified and popular guests. And also his way of questioning is a great way of, getting a lot of information out of them for it to benefit you as a listener. So if you are looking forward to understanding yourself better, or looking forward to starting a business, looking forward to improve your artistic, your creative pursuit, and so on, this is the podcast for you because there's a lot of value from this. My favorite episode from this podcast was the one he invited Andrew Huberman, and it's titled You Must Control Your Dopamine, The Shocking Truth Behind Cold Showers. I mean, there's so much value in this podcast. I think it's like 4 hours long. Like, you get it. Like, as at the time of recording this video, I'm not even done watching and listening to the podcast, but it's my best already because of the value I've gotten from it. And the main issue that it helped me solve was my sleeping patterns. Considering that Andrew Huberman is a Stanford professor of, I think, neurobiology, like he knows about the body and so on. So he really gave a lot of information about why we sleep late and wake up late. And based on the information, it really helped me fix my issue. Like, here is it. I'm sure you didn't come to this video for this, but if you're having issues with your sleep, just stick with me. Like, he mentioned 4 important things. If you're always sleeping late and waking up late, then as you're about to sleep, number 1, try and reduce the brightness into your eyes. You can change your phone to put the night filter on. I think that's what you call it, so that it can help you reduce the brightness from your phone. You can stay away from your phone hours to maybe 1 or 2 hours as you're going to bed. That's one. Try and take a hot shower in the night as you're going to sleep, because it cools your body, and if your body is cool, it's easier for you to fall asleep at that state. Another one is that you should always try to make your room conditioned to be cool. If you have AC, if you have fan, turn it on. But if your body is hot, it's very hard for you to sleep. Then the last one is you should reduce your caffeine intake. You shouldn't take coffee like from lunch till midnight, because if you take caffeine towards the end of the day, it can stop you from falling asleep. Now, this is if you want to sleep on time. Then if you want to wake up on time and stay awake without going back to sleep, then the first thing you should do if you wake up, you should get hydrated, expose yourself to sunlight. If the sun is not out yet, you can turn the light around the house to be very high so that, it can really wake you up. It sends signal into your body that it's day, that you should wake up. So these 2 things. Then if you want to take coffee, don't take it immediately after waking up. You should wait like 90 to 120 minutes. Then you can take the coffee, so that to avoid that crash that happens when you take coffee. When you take coffee very early, it keeps you up, but later on, even before it gets late, you just crash and you go back to sleep. So make sure you increase the time. Then the next thing that is very important is that you should take a cold shower. Yes, in the morning, as it is cold, take a cold shower. It wakes up your body and gives you that boost so you won't go back to sleep. Now, these are the tips. These are some of the information that I got from the video. And if you try to implement these things, to really help you sleep early and wake up early. The next podcast that I recommend is How I Write by David Perel. For you to get access to it, go to YouTube, search for David Perel. Under his YouTube channel, there's a section for podcasts. That's where you see all the podcasts under this How I Write. Now, in this podcast, he invites a lot of guests to teach you how to write better, how to improve your writing, and so on. Considering that now there's a lot of writing online, writing, on threads, on X, Twitter, whatever you call it, on Facebook, and so on. So this is a very good podcast to improve your writing. I feel like everybody should learn how to write. Everybody should learn how to communicate what's in them and share with people. And this is also a very good way for you to learn how to write as a student, because there's a lot of academic writing going on around in school, while as you're going for your bachelor's, master's, PhD, and so on. So this is a channel that I really recommend, where you get to hear from a lot of writers across different genres, where people that write novels, articles in magazines, technical writing, and so on. So there's a lot of value from this podcast if you're really into writing, if you really want to improve your writing. So my best episode from this podcast is The Expert Guide to Writing That Amazes by Kevin Kelly. Oh my God. I mean, the way this man talks about writing makes you want to go into it and, try to make it better. So make sure you check out my favorite episode. The last but not the least is The Future without the E. This is the podcast by Chris Do. Oh my God, this is one of the most underrated podcasts out there. I don't hear a lot of people recommend it and so on. I mean, Chris Do is a, genius. He's a designer. He's a content creator, you name it, a businessman, and so on. And he does a very good job of teaching people how they can improve in all these sectors. Are you into personal branding? Are you a content creator? Are you trying to become an entrepreneur? Are you trying to start your business? I mean, this is the right place to go to. Are you a freelancer? Because a lot of the guests that Chris Do invites are people that can help you, convert for you to get better in sales. Let's assume you're a freelancer, you're a graphic designer, for example. You can do the job, but can you get clients that can pay you much? Chris Do does a very good job of discussing these topics for you to navigate networking, negotiating, and so on. I mean, in this day and age that there's a lot of content creation, there's a lot of freelancing going on, people are working remote. This is the podcast that you should be listening to improve your craft. And my best episode from this podcast is Get More Clients and Referrals, How to Influence Customers, a full interview with Phil M. Jones. I mean, this Phil M. Jones guy that Chris Do invited is so good at his job. He's like a communications expert. So as he's talking on the podcast, he does a very good job of communicating with the people behind the camera. And I feel that is why I feel so attracted to the podcast, to the episode, that it is my best episode. There's a lot of value from this episode. Make sure you go and check it out. There's a lot of value from this podcast. Make sure you go and check it out. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll be mentioning some podcasts for my engineering people. Yes. So the first one is the Engineering Career Coach podcast. This is a great podcast if you're interested in engineering. Do you want to become an engineer? Are you studying engineering? Are you already an engineer? Are you looking for a job? Are you an experienced engineer? Like, if you're interested in the engineering world, this is the podcast for you, because they invite a lot of guests that tell us how, they are able to go up in their careers. Like, they invite a lot of women to talk about how women can thrive in, STEM fields and so on. It's a very good podcast that helps you. If you're working already, how can you build your skills to move to management roles, to improve and so on? I mean, there's a lot of value packed in this podcast. And the next one is the CPP Make Tutorials. Yeah, just forget about the name. Go to the channel. There's a podcast section, and there they have a lot of the episodes. Here too, they do a very good job of inviting engineers, and they talk to the listeners on how they can improve in their engineering career and in their engineering pursuits. Now, these are the podcasts that I really recommend you go check them out. Deep Dive with Ali Abdaal, Diary of a CEO, The Future without the E, and then How I Write, then +2 for engineering, the Engineering Career Coach podcast, and the CPP Make Tutorials, where you can increase your engineering knowledge. Talking about engineering knowledge, check out this video where I shared with you websites that you can increase your engineering knowledge. I hope you got a lot of value from this. Thank you very much for watching. Signing off now. See you on the next one.